Australia's broken. A lot of people...
Yeah, but let's not get to the point it's unfixable. It's fixable, but there are incumbents who don't want to fix it. Australia's got to fix its problems, focus on ours first, then we can start dictating to the world about how to fix theirs. Immigrating is not going to solve the problem which we created. We should be thinking about how are we going to get that birth rate above 2. Immigrating people is not the answer to get the birth rate up.
A lot of Australians were at that march are calling for a immediate stop to immigration. If that happens, the economy's dead.
I've always struggled with the lack of public statement about what we're trying to achieve. Australia's capital base is immense. We've stuffed up the energy market, we've stuffed up the housing market, our education system has serious flaws in it, our healthcare can be so much better.
A lot of people have lost trust in the ABS to provide immigration data. How do you go about going to primary sources and making sure it's actually...
Well, I think Australia suffers through career politicians. I think it's not good. The baton passing inside parties is not good.
We need to actually stop with the propaganda and actually have that battle of the ideas, as Tony Abbott would say. Looking at what the Prime Minister has done in his last term and this term, it seems as though his top priorities are always, how can I get back in power next time?
Productivity Roundtable a few weeks ago, I don't know what they talked about. A lot of it was behind closed doors. This should have been a big issue. And sustainability of society is very much around cost of housing and whether it's the next generation, young households can bring up a family and survive.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ark episode 49. We've got an interesting episode today. I really like to talk about economics because economics is everything. That's where we see a lot of the social problems come out. And when it comes to what's going on in Australia, we've got immigration as an issue. We've got climate change as an issue. We've got some ridiculous wastage happening in the Canberra bubble. In order to help me meander through this particular topic, I've invited John Abernethy onto the show, forgive me if I've mispronounced that, who's been an economist for nearly 40 years. He works for Climb, which is an investment management firm. He's a founder of that, and I'm very eager to pick his brain. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
John, we've just seen some massive protests over the weekend across the nation, averaging about probably 5 to 20,000 people per city. What is the situation when it comes to immigration in Australia? Where are we getting it wrong? Why are so many people angry about it? And what can the government actually do at a federal level?
Well, I think from my point of view, so I'll talk personally, I've always struggled with the lack of public statement about what we're trying to achieve. What numbers, where from, what background, what skills. We had nothing before COVID. During COVID, we stopped immigration. Coming after COVID, I remember doing presentations to my clients and predicted we would get many million of immigrants for no other reason than it would be a catch-up. That's not a reason to immigrate lots of people to catch up with what you should have gotten during COVID. It's a very poor reason. But that's essentially where we landed, and whilst I forecast that, it's not something I forecast with joy. It had an economic consequence from investing. That was my point, that it would grow the demand base of Australia, which would help certain sectors, certain companies, and that was the macro analysis which I put across portfolio construction and thinking about investing. So does that lead into the discontent on the weekend? I think that's your question. I mean, I think if people feel they're not doing well in society, they look for reasons. There can be some blame put on particularly the cost of housing by the immigration rate. The extent of that still being debated. It certainly has an effect. There are other effects on the cost of housing. But I think it's a fundamental social issue which the government and the business, the bureaucracy, have to own up to. We have really cause a problem in the cost of housing, which is causing discontent, and people need to, exhibit that discontent. They get one chance through the ballot box. Often, the politicians turn the the balloting process into a non-event because they just confuse everyone. They don't talk about issues. They run away from issues because they actually don't want to have people vote on it. And then we end up with where we are at. And in the last week, we've got a statement that the government's going to maintain immigration. Why? There's no reason what they did, no reason what they're doing now. We've had a productivity roundtable a few weeks ago. I don't know what they talked about. A lot of it was behind closed doors. That this should have been a big issue. And I think that it's a big issue for the country. We can throw up issues, but sustainability of society is very much around the cost of housing and whether it's, the next generation, young households can bring up a family and survive, and you hope we come up with answers. Otherwise, this sort of discontent's going to increase, unfortunately.
Well, you're a person that obviously delves into the detail of the numbers and exactly where they're from, the source material for the primary sources. The ABS in recent years have been talking about no longer actually really providing. A lot of people have lost trust in the ABS to provide immigration data. How do you go about going to primary sources and making sure it's actually...
Well, it's in retrospect. It's never based on forecasting. I can go back and show you charts over the last 15 years. There was a surge in immigration coming out of the GFC.
Right.
It was never questioned. We saw, I think, 300,000 or 400,000 one year under the Rudd government. And it was like, well, who decided that? What was that about? And what skills were we trying to target? What backgrounding were we trying to blend into society? What commitment did we get from these people that they would blend? Nothing. And the ramifications when you bring in a lot of people very quickly can distort the economy and have, significant effects. But that's the source. You just get the numbers on actual numbers. Live numbers, it's a dog's breakfast. You hear roadside or curbside sort of views. Oh, we got 30,000 last week and all this stuff. But I'm surprised that the Parliament doesn't produce these numbers at least monthly. I don't understand that. We have a Minister for Immigration. Surely his job is to be right across this and understand it. And then when you go to listen to Parliament, you don't hear questions, you don't hear answers. Now, that's frustrating to me. I don't think many people go home and want to listen to Parliament. I do. Occasionally, I'm not overboard, but the lack of reporting, the lack of questioning, lack of justification, and where's the plan? So I'm not ducking and weaving your question. I'm just saying I just get source documents from essentially the ABS.
Sure.
And whatever comes out of Parliament, that's it, as far as I'm concerned. If everything else is a guess, you would think.
Yeah.
But the bigger issue for me is what is the plan here?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve? And planning's a big issue, Having a target, we see, we don't want to go into the countries where it's a dictated economy, dictated leadership. But to their credit, if there's any credit, they have plans.
Yeah.
They want to achieve something in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't think a democracy like Australia, therefore, has the right not to have plans. I think it's the democratic right to have a plan and then to, check in on that plan regularly. Yeah. And immigration, alongside a housing plan, alongside a net zero plan, alongside a infrastructure plan, a healthcare plan, an aged care plan, a childcare plan, education plan, tourism plan, it's all going to be part of a plan. And I just see immigration now as like it's backfiller. We bring in people to do jobs which Australians don't think they want to do. Yeah. And that's not increasing the skill base. That's sort of downscaling, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like a Band-Aid fix, but the wound is festering.
Yeah.
So, and please talk really close to the mic, otherwise people won't pick up on it, because I want to understand, I understand that the fund you manage is about $1 billion.
Yeah.
How do you get assurances from the government and make business decisions with what you're getting right now? Because I understand that it is particularly bad in Australia compared to some other countries.
Yeah, look, that's probably... That question's a bit heavy.
Sure. Sure.
We operate on the basis that the stock market is reflecting a market, and that market is driven by capital, the want of capital to invest and get a return. So that's the basis of it. Companies are presented on the stock market to offer a return to investors. The missing link is the price of the stock, or the value of the company, and whether the returns can be generated to justify the investment in the price. And that's where it comes down to.
Yep.
We look at it macroly and say, well, yes, the government sector, in terms of fiscal policy and expenditure and the size of bureaucracy and services, that's an issue. Regulation's another issue. Directional management of the economy is another issue, but comes and goes. We'll get back to that. We try to avoid sectors which are going to be have significant government oversight. It doesn't work well when you get companies, listed companies, whose revenue numbers or their pricing is controlled by government. That's a big negative. You want to have the market price normally determine whether you want to invest in a company or not. You don't want them dictated to. So there are some industries which are affected by government interference. Some industries need to be affected by government interference. Social industries and we've had a kerfuffle, for instance, in the hospital sector, right? The private versus public, and we've got a collapse of a major private hospital group, which is on the market now. Private equity. I don't know what international private equity thought they could do with Australian hospitals, but they obviously thought they could squeeze some profit out of it unfairly and didn't get there. And they overpaid for it and overgeared it, and it's a mess. And the consequences of that mess are quite significant for a healthcare sector. If we do have a plan for healthcare, and I'd put it to people that, Australia has, today we had this debate around net zero by 2050. Great. If that's a plan, that's a plan. But there's 25 years to go for that, and I just wonder whether that plan will move. I think 25-year plans are great, but you've got to stick to them. But inside that, could we, why not in 10 years' time, we have a plan to make Australia the best healthcare in the Western world? That'll be a plan. Then you say, how do we get there? How do we make it the best aged care in the world? How do we, why don't we have a 10-year plan that there'll be no one living on the street? Yeah. Why don't we have a 10-year plan that will make housing affordable? Mm. So I'm going all over the place here, but, government planning is important if we can understand it and we can get behind it. What we've got is throwaway lines by government and bureaucracy, and you're directly to answer your question, some of which we ignore. After you see statements which are never followed up, or which are too unbelievable to believe, and you just know as time passes they'll be dropped or they'll be changed. So sometimes you just ignore it and you don't let it. However, when you do, as our previous commentary about immigration, when you do bring in 1 million people over 2.5 years, you then have to think about what that means for certain sectors of the Australian economy, what stresses and strains it puts on, or what beneficiaries. Yeah. And in recent times, we've seen quite a big recovery in retail sector of the stock market. When people come here, they don't just breathe air, they consume. Yeah. They want to integrate into the economy, work, earn wages, pay tax, pay GST, and consume. Mm. So it's a net positive. Particularly if you bring in people at or above the average wage. When you bring in people at well below the average wage, you do create other problems, social problems. Yeah. And that probably we saw that on the weekend, some of the issues about that. So they're big issues, but as a macroeconomist, what I try to do in our company is try to say, well, these are the macro issues. These are the sectors I think it's going to touch, affect, be positive for. That's how I see my job as the old guy in the room. So.
Well, when it comes to immigration, just to tie off it as a topic, I alluded to it being a bit of a shot in the arm, a temporary sugar hit. Where do you think it's going wrong with that, and what approach do you think the government could be doing a bit better with regards to immigration?
Let's call it the way it is. The reason we're immigrating is because our birth rates dropped. Mm. And the reason our birth rates dropped is because it's incredibly expensive to bring up a family. Now, there's lots of arguments whether this generation, the born after 1990 and so on, whether they expect too much, and they're overcapitalising their houses and, overexpending on education and spoiling their kids. And there might be some truth to that. Well, from where I come from, as a 1958 baby, I came through in the 60s, and my family, we had 2 bedrooms for 4 kids and 2 parents, and we were happy, But today, that no one would put up with that unless they were immigrants coming out of the, Asia. They'd put up with it, but Australians wouldn't put up with it. And so there's an issue around that.
Sure.
So, but the fact is, our birth rates dropped to about 1.8. We're tracking what's happened in Europe. When your birth rate drops, then you have a problem in terms of distribution of age, distribution of ages, and those who are going into retirement and those who are working. And the society was set up is that we want people to work and pay taxes and contribute to those who are retiring. The superannuation system Australia's got sort of works, sort of doesn't work for that goal. And that's another part of the economy which needs to be reviewed. So I think the immigration, to answer your question, I always go around the world with a macro brain.
You've come to the right place, so don't worry. The audience loves it.
Yeah, no, but we're immigrating to fill a problem which we created.
Right.
And immigrating is not going to solve the problem which we created. That's, that we should be thinking about how are we going to get that birth rate above 2.
Okay.
Immigrating people is not the answer to get the birth rate up.
Yeah.
And it's causing other problems in terms of more demand for housing. And, Australia's great at producing big housing, not small housing, and we're getting, a mismatch there in demand supply. We're bringing in people and who want to live in Australia, quite rightly. You look at where they're coming from. Why wouldn't they want to come here? What would shock them is the cost of living. And immigrants, I think it's fair to say, but who are coming from their heritage have probably got a higher birth rate than Australia. And they're probably the thing they don't appreciate is it's bloody hard to get to have a family here.
Yeah.
And if we're immigrating people on below average earnings and asking a husband and wife with a couple of kids to work service jobs at below the average and then live 50 miles from Sydney, and maybe work 2 jobs, I guess everyone watching this can think of their own personal circumstances. When my father was in high care, and I used to talk to some of his nurses, I was stunned where they came from, how far they had to travel. And they all had 2 jobs. Some had 3. And you just wonder, what are we trying to create here? Is that it solves a problem, but it's not a solution, if you know what I mean. It's not the solution. So immigration is used poorly in Australia and not inside a big plan.
Right. It's a tough one because a lot of Australians that were at that march are calling for a immediate stop to immigration. Yeah. Now, from what I feel like you're throwing down here is if that happens, economy's dead. Unless you deal with the other side of the seesaw, being birth rates, in terms of actually building the fundamentals of an economy and industry and innovation and creating the, if I can say so, the economic conditions that business can thrive and entrepreneurs can flourish. Unless we deal with that side of it, cutting immigration is basically us getting rid of our crutch before our legs healed.
Look, Australia's slowing anyway. And the growth we've seen in the last few years is really being immigration. If we didn't have immigration, we'd be going backwards now. Right. And the growth we're having is not satisfactory. It's not causing people to jump up with joy and say we're growing. We've got plenty of evidence that the inflation rate is above the wages growth. The national income is not matching inflation. And when you put immigration through there, it's going back. The average person is having a substantial decline in his standard of living as we speak, immigration or no immigration. It's probably time to take a deep breath and say, well, maybe we need to slow the economy naturally and work on what we can do well and dispense with what we're wasting money on, wasting time on, wasting energy on, and refocus the economy. And I've in some of my talks to my clients and writings, I like things like the productivity round table, but I like them a lot more if they're every 3 months, not every 3 years.
Right.
I have an election, let's jump around a table and let's have the Prime Minister say, look, we're not really interested in what you're saying because we're the government, but please have it. And then he shoots out the door to go to Adelaide. And the Treasury was obviously trying to build something, completely lost momentum. And now we've got to wait another 3 years to see what happens. I mean, that's not the way to run an economy.
Right.
So I think it's time to take a much deeper breath and get various roundtables together to start saying, working out, as I said, what we do well, what we can do better, what we're wasting time on, what we're wasting energy on, and what we're trying to achieve by what time frame. And so get the economy mobilised, get the business leaders focused, get the bureaucracy to understand that that they should not be responding to thought bubbles of politicians to gather votes. I think there was a time when the bureaucracy of Australia was highly regarded, forward-thinking, and I don't know when they've lost their way, but it seems somewhere around the turn of the century, in those dying Howard years, when we improved the balance sheet of Australia substantially, and we could have then slowly re-geared our balance sheet, start building assets for the public balance sheet, and rebuild again and refocus. But you look at the last 25 years, it's just been a schmozzle. Succession of leaders, both sides of Parliament, the emergence of third parties with just want to, be populist, not thinking about the big picture, very focused on small issues, which is fine to a point, but when they deviate into bigger issues, they've got no idea what they're talking about. And Australia just seems to be stumbling along. So what can be done? I think it's, to your point, we could slow immigration substantially. We still have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people unemployed. Could we get those people working? Should we be bringing in immigrants to do low-paid jobs when we've got people who could do those jobs who decide they don't want to because their perceived standard of living needs to be higher, their perceived wages need to be higher. I understand that, and I'm not about being draconian, but that's also a reflection of the high cost of living. People say, well, if I don't have to work and I get this, if I go to work, I'm going to pay transport costs, I've got to get home, I'm going to have a whole lot of other costs. You don't make it easy.
And get the same amount from the government.
Same amount.
Yep.
They're big issues, and I'm not here to give you the answers because people watch these and go, what's the answer, John? So no, the answer is getting highly intelligent people around a table consistently, focus on what they can talk about best. Like there's a lot of things I can't go and talk about because I know where my limitations are. Big picture, I've got a view, but I'd like to see Australia take a deep breath and work out where we want to be at what time. I don't see any of it. And I find it disturbing, that the Western world is right across Europe and North America. It's just flopped along. There is no plan, no vision. Meanwhile, the parts of the world we don't like have a vision.
Yep.
And we've seen it on display in recent days, as you know. That's something we should all reflect on.
With longer terms as well, in some of those countries. Never-ending terms.
Benevolent dictatorship, and I've used the word benevolent, which is hard to get in the Western world, a dose of that would not hurt. A Singapore type of focus, but we're not going to go there because everyone's scared.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I just saw, I do believe it was last night, there was a piece about the Albanese government exploring a bill which would extend terms to 4 years, another referendum being put up and also some more MPs added, but that 4-year term rather than 3-year term, giving them that a little bit extra time. 3 years is a short time in the defence.
Yeah.
I think Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, did come out and say, look, I think people need more elections, not less. But other Liberal leaders have also said, look, it's too short of a time. By the time you've paid off all the people that have gotten you elected, you're ready for another election.
Yeah. Look, we can go the American route, and I think to their, there's a lot of things I don't like about America, but mid-term Senate, the House of Review, the State's House, yes, that could be your every 2-year election,
right,
as long as they're 4-year. So coming up with that sort of compromise, I do agree that 3 years is a short period for a government but when they want to do something, and they, we're 6 months into this parliament, and honestly, what's going on? I mean, there's been great debates and nothing happening, and they're forcing through aged care issues overnight. We've still got a superannuation bill, and I go, where's it gone?
Yeah.
And housing policy debate, no answers.
Yeah.
So I think 4-year term, 2-year Senate, are lots of roundtables where business leaders and government bureaucracy talk, not once every 3 years, not once every 4 years, every 3 to 6 months, and running verticals, healthcare vertical, education vertical, tourism vertical, minerals vertical, all these verticals. Get the smartest guys in Australia to start talking.
Yep.
And get the corporate sector about thinking about what's good for Australia. I think we're breaking apart here, and I guess it's leadership, and we can go on about Donald Trump, but he is showing some sort of leadership there, and whether it works or not, time will tell.
Yep.
I think I look at Donald Trump as 50% good and 50% strange, but the 50% good is going to propel America forward in a very difficult world. Right. Australia doesn't even have 50% good at present. I don't know what we have, but...
yeah, we've got a wet lettuce of a handshake.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, I'm a little fan of Donald Trump.
Okay.
But just slightly. Hence right. the MAGA.
Okay, well, at least I'm 50-50.
Yeah, just like, at least 50-50. But you're not wrong. I mean, the fish, just as the fish rots from the head down, similarly, if you've got a great leadership, it gives business assurance and confidence.
Yeah.
And I see that, and that's why I'm really keen to, that's what this show's about. You've got to bring the Australian people along for the ride, explain to them what's going on in Canberra, because it's becoming harder and harder for them to keep up with what's going on, because now it's taking two working parents to just pay for the kid to be at healthcare, or 3 kids or whatever. And so that's why this is so important. It's giving these people free information. Here you go. This is what the Prime Minister's about. You don't have to agree with this, but in my opinion, looking at what the Prime Minister has done in his last term and this term, it seems as though his top priorities are always, how can I get back in power next time? The voice referendum, he looks at how can we entrench power into the Constitution? How can we, like even this bill coming up, 4-year terms, another referendum and more MPs, and maybe more senators in that bill. These are the things that I'm noticing. And it's like, hang on, you have like shareholders, the voters.
Yeah.
What are you doing for them? What have you done for me lately? A lot of people are asking that. And I don't know what you think of that.
No, well, you're right. I mean, you can't look back since the Second World War and see too many governments which have delivered the lowest standard of living. Australia's been on a pretty strong growth profile for 80 years, and now we've jolted since COVID.
Yeah.
I think the problems were pre-COVID, frankly, but we've had a jolt since then. What is he doing? I actually thought until 2 weeks before the last election, I think he was sort of resigned to losing. But given that he's defined benefits, pensions, it wouldn't have been a bad result here. It's like heads I win, tails I win. I mean, so he's got back in. I think it's a surprise. I don't think he really felt that until we got close to election date, and a lot of people got it wrong. And a bit like America, Trump got up because I think the alternative wasn't much good. Australia, the Liberal Party really put a pathetic case to the Australian public. And I think there was a lot of bias in the analysis. People said, well, I'm anti-Labor, so I'm going to vote Liberal. But they missed the whole point that the Liberals weren't putting up tangible policy. And to its credit, the Australian people, we can talk about the 32% who voted, but to their credit, they weren't in aggregate going to put the other side in because they didn't have anything to offer. And the current government had only been in 3 years, probably given that a go. I don't believe you can be so far, in terms of seats in the House of Reps that you're undefeatable. We know things can turn.
Yeah.
And
John Howard, similar amount of seats, and he lost losing the next.
He lost his prime ministership, and bringing that up, I think Australia's slide really started, unfortunately, under Howard, because I think people, and I think Labor's going to fall for the same problem. I think people like to think, well, I've got a leader now. Who's the next leader? Who's being groomed for the job, so they can see continuity. Labor's now got this strange way they elect their leader, and who's the next guy? No one knows. The current guy, I don't think he expected to be past the election. Now he's got it. He's got the taste.
Yeah.
But really, this should be his last term, and he should hand over to someone else, and it should be obvious who it is. I don't think there's any clear runner there. But Howard should have handed over to Costello, and not that I'm a Costello fan, but I think there was a transition there. Hawke did the same thing. Keating fell through one election, But quite clearly, Hawke should have passed the baton,
Yeah.
Is 8 years, 6, 8, 9 years, 10 years long enough to be a Prime Minister? Menzies wouldn't agree, but he's gone. They're not monarchs. They're not there for life. And I think Australia suffers through career politicians. I think it's not good. The baton passing inside parties is not good. The bringing up of intelligent, younger people through with new thoughts. A lot of what we're talking about is it the older generation who's upset with Australia, or is it the next generation? I think it's the next generation. And so having old people telling you how good things are in their world is not going to help. And things can move very quickly. And we're seeing the protests, which we've talked about, but swings in political party. Should Australia have more political parties? Probably should. Should they be in the middle? Probably should. Should they be sensible? Absolutely. But crikey, in the way we sit today, being a politician, I've got to take my hat off to them. The abuse they cop, and I like to be reasonable in my criticism. Some people will make that assessment where I am reasonable. But, I think we need politicians who come and go. Probably 8 to 10 years is long enough. They should be out of Parliament. I think when they stay and stay and stay, you get bias, you get dogma, and you don't get youthful relief, and intelligent relief. I think it's, and it also goes for the bureaucracy. We've got lifetime bureaucrats there.
Yeah, on more than the Prime Minister,
That's
or
right.
money than the Prime Minister.
So,
Yes. I think that's a big criticism of Canberra when it comes to people thinking about if you want to be into politics nowadays, it's not like it used to be. You used to have people that would go in that were chartered accountants, people that had various different professions. You had a healthy cross-section of Australia with certain professions.
people studying at night. I go back into the 70s. I had an interest in politics in the 70s, which was the Whitlam era. I was only 14 when he was elected, but it was an interesting period for someone who was interested in politics as a teenager, which is not the norm today, so I admit that. But my father used to come in the door at night at 6 o'clock and there'd be question time, would be on the ABC radio and his transistor when he walked in. It sort of got me. And it was interesting times, and we had great debates on TV. The ABC had something called Monday Conference. And I used to watch it. My father used to say, you should watch this. Remember Bill Hayden was on it. And Bill Hayden was, I think, he was an ex-policeman. And he also studied at night economics. And I think an incredibly decent man would have been a great Prime Minister. Didn't get there because of Bob Hawke and the Drover's dog comment, which some people might remember watching this. He would have won the election. Yeah. Because Fraser had stuffed it up. But Bill Hayden brought in Medicare, or Medibank. Always got to be careful there.
Yeah.
And I remember on Monday Conference one night, there was 500 GPs screaming at him. You can't do this. This is socialism.
Yeah.
Now, that was in the late 70s, mid-70s, and here we are 50 years later. It's the backbone of Australia's healthcare system. But he knew everything about that, and he took on that great debate. We don't have enough people like that anymore. I don't know where they've gone, but they're not going into politics.
Well, the internet, the universities, it's all going online. That's what seems to be happening. And the inevitable evolution of this show is a live audience with Q&A in a Q&A style. And that is really what's missing. I do believe ABC's Q&A, it's become just... And I think we're seeing that with the ratings. It's not representative at all. The people that apply to be in the audience, it's all leaning towards the ABC viewership. And
they should look back 50 years and look at Monday Conference. It worked. It was intelligent. It was real issues at the time, real changes in legislation, real social policy changes debated, or the minister concerned fronted people with their concerns or confronted industries. And, it was great stuff to be a teenager in those years. I guess I should have been doing other stuff, but that's where I landed. And
the battle of ideas. And that's what John Anderson says. He says, look, you can't get good policy out of a bad public debate. Yeah. If we're gonna have this approach, we need to actually stop at the propaganda and actually have that battle of the ideas, as Tony Abbott would say. We've got to actually engage with that. Yeah. But it just seems like it's all about propaganda and setting things up and lining it up for the legislative week. And
but I remember, I don't want to go back in time, but the question time used to be intelligent, funny, respectful. And I can talk about listening to Parliament in England about 30 years ago, and they called it Prime Minister's question time. So the Prime Minister took questions from everywhere, and it was respectful. Right. I remember listening, I thought this is interesting compared to Australia's rabble. And we were bad then, but we're worse now. I guess Keating took us on another, with and great orator, but quite cut through.
Yeah.
Broken
a few laws.
Yeah. And
Right.
question time now is so sanitised, it's embarrassing.
Yes.
It's embarrassing that we have people who are elected to run the country having a pantomime for an hour each day in Parliament, getting their hair cut, putting their makeup on and getting people positioned in the camera and throwaway lines, Dorothy Dix questions. I mean...
Picking the questions.
That's right.
Well, you can ask, as Senator Babbitt or whoever, they're like, okay, here's 5 questions. Which one can I ask you, Prime Minister?
Yeah.
So what is this democracy?
And the answer is, I'd like to thank the member who's a fantastic member for his question. Oh, do we have to hear that every day?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we've devalued and debased Parliament. And another view of mine, I think, when we talk about 4-year terms and changing, you just don't change federal, you've got to change state. And it's always intrigued me, the federal system, which, it was great in 1900. We're now in the 21st century.
Mm.
Yeah. Constitutions are great, but should they be sacrosanct? They can't be changed. Well, surely something written in horse and buggies days where it took you 2 days or 3 days to go from Sydney to Melbourne is not appropriate today when it takes you an hour. So we have to rethink about it. And do we need state governments with 2 chambers? If we have a 4-year term, maybe we should also have the states being elected at the same time, and not this haphazard election cycle all over the place.
Yeah.
So again, waste the money. But you talk about productivity. My view is productivity starts when you wake up. Every day, how am I going to improve my lot personally? Government should be thinking how they're going to improve the social lot. Bureaucracy, how we're going to make it easier for business within the rules and fairness and all that. Well, it's a battle every day we wake up, and we've got all these rules and regulations, state-based, council rates. And I just walked up Pitt Street to come here. And when I was walking up from the ferry this morning, the street was blocked, because we've now got 2 lanes. We've got a bike lane, we've got a sit-down lane. With a couple of people can sit in Pitt Street having a sandwich. Now, I don't see many of them. I don't see many bikes, by the way, but the cars are clogged up.
Yeah.
Now, is that clever? They're producing carbon. They're using energy going nowhere. But obviously, the Council of Sydney thinks that's good, based on something they saw in Paris. I don't know. I mean, that
Amsterdam.
Australians, if you come to Australia, the one thing that hits you in Sydney compared to, say, Adelaide, parts of Melbourne, our streets are haphazard. Some are small, some are... That doesn't matter to the Sydney Council. Let's block Pitt Street. We've closed off George Street. Let's stuff Pitt Street, and let's make it a quagmire to get in and out of the place. I mean, now if you put a productivity overlay on that, you'd say that's pretty darn stupid. It might feel good to have bikes, 1 or 2 every hour, but while the cars are clogged up. And so that's why I talk about 4-year terms interesting, but you've got to change the whole vertical, federal, Commonwealth, state, council. What's the right mix?
Yeah.
And should they all be going to the electorate at the same time so we get 4-year terms for each?
Yeah.
But and then the midpoint is the House of Review. It's almost like we're protest vote time, which is fine. I mean, that gives...
Sure.
Yeah.
Might improve the legislation, but New Zealand survives without one. Not exactly the economy is doing well over there, but it does survive without one. Queensland survives without one.
Yeah, but you listen to I don't want to be rude, but the quality of New Zealand Prime Minister generally has been pretty bloody good. More so from the right,
Sure.
But there's been some great Prime Ministers who have come out of business. You rarely see that in Australia, and New Zealand stuffed up because their Reserve Bank, for some mad reason, put up interest rates and followed America. And I remember looking at the time and saying, that was pretty darn stupid. They caused the recession. Now they're trying to dig themselves out of it. They were trying to address a housing affordability problem with a rocket when, yes, they had international investing. They cut that off. Speculation in property, capital gains free. They put up interest rates. Well, I think they probably lost a couple 100,000 smart people left the country. So that wasn't very clever.
It seems that way. New Zealand is one of the biggest countries sending Australia some of its best. So, yes. No, I was going to say, when it comes to the bureaucrats and this massive government, the empire does tend to strike back when you start changing things. I'm not sure if you'd agree with that, but you start saying, look, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut that, we're going to restructure this. There is a sense of they're very active in getting on the street. And I think, who was it? Campbell Newman in Queensland tried to cut a lot of the public service. Yeah. They ended up throwing him out, basically, after a one term.
Yeah, look, he cut too hard too quickly. I think he was probably right in what he was trying to do, but, you're going to run up against hurdles all the way, and the bureaucracy is very good at fortifying itself. That's what they do. They fortify themselves, and we have to be aware of that. And just as I say, politicians need to have limited lifetime, I think bureaucrats probably do as well. I mean, I think having a career in government service, we need to think about that. Just as we have people in a career in defence. Why? It leads to some bad outcomes, I think. Lack of commercial experience, business acumen, reality. You talk about the Canberra bubble. And do they listen to what the people say? Do people write to the bureaucrats, or they write to the minister, the parliament? Should the bureaucrats be more on display? About the recommendations. We've got this great debate about superannuation at present. And
yes. I mean,
it's right in my alley because my clients, self-directed retirees, the overall majority aren't affected, let's be real.
Yeah.
But I can tell you the majority of my clients with a few million in super would not contest a reasonable tax on excessive benefits in super. I think that's most Australians would agree with that. But when you get a bureaucracy who comes out with some unrealised capital gains tax and then say it won't affect many people, and what are you all getting upset by? And you go, well, if it's not going to affect many people and not raise much money, why are you doing it? And there's a very sinister reason why they're doing it this way, is because there is a layer of the bureaucracy who have got very significant retirement benefits, which are kept away from the public. They're not disclosed. There's at least a dozen politicians. There would be dozens and dozens of bureaucrats who are looking at lifetime pensions. Some were contributed to, some weren't. It's a mystery. No one asks. No one wants to know. I've written lots of articles on it. Is it bad? It has to be bad. I'll tell you why it has to be bad. You go back to when we set up the Future Fund, which was to meet the unfunded liabilities. An actuary said, in 2006, 140 billion, by 2020, done. No problem. Here we are today, and we have 240 billion in the Future Fund. It still hasn't paid a pension. The latest estimate of the liability is north of $300 billion. So something's rotten, okay? Now, the exponential growth in the liability suggests there are some people who are getting hideously high benefits. Now, I know you are on about the press. The press doesn't ask. The parliament doesn't ask. There's lots of inquiries into superannuation in the Senate.
This is a huge scandal.
Well, it's a scandal. I don't want to liken it to Epstein, but I mean, when something is in front of your face and no one wants to ask the question and no one wants to answer it. And I'll give you an example, and I don't want to mention names, but you'll work it out. I mean, I went through the asset disclosures of politicians, which you have to do at every... And I can't find one politician who's disclosed they got a defined benefit. Now, is that an asset that should be disclosed? There are politicians on both sides of the House who have got 4, 5 and 6 investment properties. They have to disclose that, whether it's in their name or their spouse. But defined benefits are not disclosed. Now, if I went into a bank and wanted to borrow money and I was 55 and a politician and I was getting a lifetime pension, I'm sure I'd put it on my asset register and explain to a bank why they should lend me money against that known cash flow, which is government guaranteed and indexed. That gives me tremendous gearing capacity. So the ability to create wealth. But that's not in a disclosure on the public domain, in a public document by politicians. And why?
Because it's covered by employment law, isn't it?
I don't know. Well, I don't care what laws.
It should be public.
Who's protecting who in the zoo?
It's the taxpayer.
Well, the taxpayer is paying somewhere, and again, if you went to the budget papers, you'd struggle to find the numbers, but it's somewhere, let's call it 15 billion, which taxpayers are paying every year, going to pay pensions under defined benefit schemes,
Right.
which the future fund's not paying. Now, if we're running a 40 billion deficit this year, if that's the number, well, I can knock 15 billion off it pretty quickly by getting the future fund to pay its own pensions. And if the future fund paid its own pensions, guess what it would have to do? It would have to change its asset mix, and it would have to invest more in Australian income. And we'd get a reset of that fund, which is claimed to be the future fund. Well, it's no one's future other than the beneficiaries of that fund. It's not Australia's national fund. So there's a scandal goes on, and in front of our eyes, and it doesn't matter how many times I write about it, how many times, and people would say, well, John, you might be wrong. That's why no one wants wrong with it. Nah, there are great cover-ups in this country, and hats off to you. Let's talk about them, expose them. I mean, I think I read in the last few days that the Freedom of Information Act, they want to change. They want to stall that.
I believe so.
You go, well, why? What is being hidden? I read the other day, and I'm getting old. There's so much information. I mean, we had a disaster in Queensland, a helicopter crash. There's liability in terms of employment liability, but we can't see why that's the conclusion. It's been kept secret. It's like, why? So how can someone make a judgment that there is a liability under employment law, but the reasoning for that can't be made public, even though it's a government payout that'll be of taxpayers' money? So these are strange things. And I think there is agreement in Parliament at a certain level where certain things aren't asked, certain things aren't questioned, certain information doesn't flow. And that's hideous. That's why you need to turn over the Parliament and don't have these people sitting there for decades, because they're actually doing a disservice in terms of information flow. Young people would come in and say, no, that's unacceptable, give me the answer. Old people say, no, it's always been that way. It's comfortable. We don't ask them, and they don't ask us, because I'll be the government one day, and I'll be the opposition. It seems to be like
it is like that. One hand washes the other.
That's right, and it's unacceptable. So I'm all for change.
Yeah,
but let's acknowledge there's some problems.
This will get some views.
Will it?
Yeah. This will get some views. I've done a lot of interviews. This is almost episode 50 of the Ark. This is 49. But I've been doing this for a few years, and I'm like, no, this is big. There's going to be a lot of people that write about this. I think it's a very big deal.
Right.
I think so. We've helped a lot of people do Freedom of Information Act as Turning Point Australia. We help people, and they submit the forms, and we write it up for them. But the problem is when they get the form inevitably and they don't get the information, they don't have the money to litigate it and actually go, well, hang on a sec. I am the plaintiff here. I am the person that's the taxpayer. I've got skin in the game.
Yeah.
But the problem is a lot of people, they're not willing to put the money up to actually litigate that and take to the High Court.
Why should they?
Why should they? And it's
what do we have a parliament for? What do we have Senate inquiries for?
Yeah.
I'd have a simple question. Can someone tell me what the largest annual pension paid under the defined benefit schemes of Commonwealth of Australia? What is the largest payment this year to an individual? Very simple question. I think it would stun people.
Right.
It would stun people how big that. And, the 2005 defined benefit scheme, which was closed off, there were recipients there have been retired for 20 odd years and, got X% of their salary and they can leave it to their spouse. This is, it's gutting the balance sheet of Australia. You can't sit there. I don't know how politicians can sit there and see if I'll give you an instance. The two Pococks, the senators, recently were having the Future Fund executives or someone in the Senate, and they asked them questions. Oh, you guys spent $180,000 on overseas travel last year. They thought that was a big issue. They're managing $240 billion of Future Fund, and there's another $50 billion of. So they're managing close to $300 billion, and the two Pococks, and I think they're reasonable people. They do run hard on some good issues, but I thought, why would you be sitting there and chasing 180 grand? These people are travelling the world and going to conferences, including the chair. Yeah. But I'd say, hold on, while you're here, can you tell us why the liability was estimated at $140 billion and now it's 330 billion and growing. Can you tell us that? We're talking hundreds of billions, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, how did they come up with that focus? That's wrong.
I think it's character attack. I think it's about re-elections and character attacks and smears. I think that's what it is. Because the disclosures is a lot of information. But you're totally right. I think that people have a better ability to conceptualize a few 100,000 than billions. I mean, it's 1,000 million. As for people, it's hard to conceptualize that at all.
What's the submarine do? I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in 30-odd years. Maybe. unless the US wants to keep them. Well, you don't have to be that clever. I mean, I'll give you a number. I think the Chinese economy is estimated $18 trillion US. If they spend 5% on defence, we're getting close to $1 trillion a year US. That's about 80% of Australia's GDP. Have we got any hope? If that's what your arms race is, forget it. And when India mobilises, hopefully they're on our side. I've had this comment, are they on the G7 side or on the BRICS side? They should be playing on our side, not the other side. But, so, and if anyone thinks a war in 30 years' time is going to be with rockets and missiles, I mean, they're kidding themselves. I think there's things we haven't even thought of about it, and you don't want to go there. We really should be working out how to live harmoniously with each other.
Absolutely.
Not to scare people. And I think I fear for the next generation who must go to bed at night thinking, well, in 30 years' time, is there going to be a world war? Because that's all they hear about.
Yeah.
That's all they hear about is that we're going to have, well, the last world war was 80 years ago. It's like, why would you think there's going to be another world war? If that's it, it's a hopeless way to run an economy, And there's way too much money spent on it by some, America, way too little spent on defence by others, Europe. And so that's one of the reasons I think Trump was right there. That was outrageous. But successive American administrations let him get away with it,
Yeah.
And let Germany buy gas off Russia. I mean, honestly, how dumb was that?
Yeah.
But that sort of dumb thought process, I think, is permeating through Australia. We're getting the same sort of dumb issues, like one of the world's biggest exporters of energy, but we can't supply ourselves. That is, I mean, you'd like to know who was behind those decisions. Are they getting a lifetime pension? I'd take it off them because they've cost the country a fortune. And you go back to some of these appalling decisions over, as I said, Australia's got to work out what it can do well, do it, generate income, and reinvest as much as possible and distribute fairly. We've failed miserably in the last 20 years at doing that. And hence you get these protests. People, they're worried about their kids, their grandkids, worried about cost of housing, We haven't had to worry about jobs yet. As I said earlier, I've lived through 2 major recessions. Coming out of university in 82, couldn't get a job as a lawyer. I was secure in 92, 93. Recession we had to have, but, that knocked some people around. But, we've got people who are not used to being confronted with unemployment.
Well, it's encouraging, John, that you're speaking about this. I'm curious where that comes from an inner perspective. Why not just keep your head in the sand per se? Just focus on your investment fund.
I'm not wealthy enough to say I'm going to create some sort of fund for my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or that. That's. I think you live in the here and today. My family, you very much. We had a very happy family, and a small household and public school. I was intrigued by intelligent politicians and vision and what they saw. So that's where I come from. I think if people, what I like about, a lot of immigrants is they have a go. And they're given an unfair advantage because a lot of Australians don't want to have a go. Do we not want to have a go because we're not prepared to take a risk, or if we had it bashed out of us, or the education system's not producing, we have a very strange education system in Australia, which even as a child, I used to think, why am I learning this? What's this going to do? Is that abundant common sense, or is it an excessive ego? I don't know, but I struggled with some of the... Education's great to make you think. Let's not kid about it, but, not everyone's going to be a lawyer or an economist or a doctor or a dentist. What Australia lacks is tradies. And the education system doesn't produce that, and the immigration is not solving it. So some food for thought there. But it comes from, a fair go background. I think never wanting excessively, being happy, with what you got. And if you're not over-rewarded, you're always striving, I think. If you're over, I think I see it in the financial markets, people being very over-rewarded for very mediocre returns. And I think you say, why? I'm in my late 60s, over the 40 years of business, I had a frenetic period in the 80s and 90s as a fund manager at NRMA, and we're one of the biggest investors in Australia. What I see the industry funds dealing with today in terms of managing large amounts of money, I dealt with a long time ago. And there is diseconomies of scale in investing. You can get way too much money. I don't know if people reading this, there's a presentation given at the press club by the head of Aussie Super, and he made a very pertinent comment. Australia is now an exporter of capital. We're an exporter of capital to the world. 27 million people out of 8.5 billion, and we're exporting capital to the world. Is that great? Or is it embarrassing?
Yeah.
So what are we saving for?
Yes.
The opportunity for Australia's capital base is immense. Yet we've stuffed up the energy market. We've stuffed up the housing market. Our education system has serious flaws in it. Our healthcare can be so much better. We're just giving $400 million away to export 130 immigrants, illegal immigrants. $400 million? How could you justify that? How many hospitals could that build? I just go, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
When you read that and no one questions it, and...
it's broken. Australia's broken. A lot of people...
but let's not get to the point it's unfixable. It's fixable, but there are incumbents who don't want to fix it. The life cycle, there's a lot of people who say, just get me to retirement and I'm out of here. You asked me about, I'm not that sort of person. I can see myself contributing in some form, whether people like it or not, contributing to the thought process. Yes, I do want to spend a lot more time on my farm and my grandkids. I do want to do that, but I still don't want to switch off the lights.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of better people out there than me. I don't want people with intelligent thoughts and who can speak switching off at 65. It's embarrassing. But we've created a superannuation system which does encourage a lot of people to switch off and say, I'm out of here. I've got my $20 million house and I've got my... just off I go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's appalling. That is appalling, and it's not right. So we've got to balance it. So if I'm helping balance it and throw up some thoughts there and some hard discussion points, and I'm the first to admit a lot of this is me saying things can be better and they won't be better. And I get a lot of commentary about what I say. Well, John, you're dreaming. Well, I think the world over the last tens of thousands of years developed because people dreamt about what could be. John F. Kennedy's great speeches, What can we do for the country, effectively? Not what can we do for ourselves, what can we do for the country? And we all live on Earth, and we all breathe the same air, as he once said. I saw the Chinese leader say exactly the same, similar sort of words last night.
All right.
We're all part of this planet. We can't get off it, It's about time we had leaders who acknowledged that and said, well, we better get on with this. So Australia's got to fix its problems, focus on ours first, then we can start dictating to the world about how to fix theirs. That doesn't mean we disengage. But, when we've got a reasonably clean sheet, then we can be proactive on the world stage. I think before we get there, we're kidding ourselves. And you probably make more enemies than friends by doing that, and unnecessarily so.
That's why I asked the question.
Oh, okay, good.
Because I think a lot of young'uns coming up in the KPMGs of the world and the other funds managers, they know they see this.
Yeah.
but they know if they speak out there, like the corporate world's almost built to be like a whack-a-mole if you put your head up.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, so shoot me. So what? I'm 68. But I mean, and I've got nothing, just the way I think of it. And I don't have to face the electorate. So I acknowledge that the politicians have got to keep one eye on the electorate. But
you've been around the block, and I think that there's a lack of respect that we may have seen with people like Packer and Kerry Packer. Well, it's a very different vibe. The viral clips of him just hammering all the politicians and taking them to school.
Yeah,
it's the other way around now. Now the politicians are educating us and talking down to us, but these are young Liberal people. These are young Labor people. They came from the unions. They didn't come from trades quite often.
Yeah, Kerry Packer controlled the press and with Murdoch at that stage. So what he said went. So it's a different era. The politicians were subservient as much as possible, and particularly Murdoch, who he backed generally won the election, and he swung back and forth. So he wasn't always...
Sure.
He says he was.
Sure. They're on their best behaviour because of that.
Social media is good and bad, This is good because I'm talking now. But it's debates have got to be had, and I think when Parliament fails to have proper debates, there's got to be a forum somewhere else. Yeah.
The energy's got to go somewhere, absolutely. Well, look, I
just lost my microphone.
Oh, you did you? Are you able to? Are you
back now?
Good. Oh, good. Very good. When it comes to the next couple of weeks, there's actually a rally on the 13th of September, which is basically being branded like Australia's broken, and there's a lot of the word corruption's thrown in there to do with various things that are going on, whether it's the renewable industry, whether it's the what you've alluded to earlier with regards to these undisclosed retirement arrangements that are done. There's a lot of rorts on various different levels of the bureaucracy, and the politicians are getting very rich on, whilst protecting themselves. It's like the rats fleeing the sinking ship.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the best things Australia could be doing right now to unleash its economy that we're not currently doing?
Look, it's too big a question, and I'd bore myself. But I don't like, as a lawyer, and you can change laws. And I think it's a great excuse by people not to change. Say, well, that's the law. Don't change it. If it's not broken, why fix it? Your comment, and if these protests go ahead, and if that's the basis that it is broken, let's acknowledge there are some broken elements of society. Let's define them. Let's work out what is created by the law, what is created by poor regulation of society. So let's be realistic and then fix them up, and not be caught in the view that, well, the law says or the Constitution says you can't do that. Well, it's about time we reviewed the Constitution after 120 years and say, well, look, let's bring it up to date. Let's think about it. All these ideas of changing parliamentary terms and all that, great ideas, but you've got to do a complete change. And I remember when a friend of mine who was very deep thinker, we talked about getting rid of the monarchy and becoming a republic, and we're having a debate, and he floored me. He said, well, John, getting rid of the king or queen and just having a president, that's not going to solve the problem. You've got to completely fix the whole system. And he got me thinking. He was right. I mean, just changing that's not going to fix that. So these are very big issues, and protests are good, but this is a 24-hour news service, and the attention span of most people is getting smaller and smaller, and some people might have already turned off listening to this, going, it's going on too long. But we need to answer your question, we need to acknowledge what's wrong, which we can fix, and how do we fix it? Okay, and that goes right across society. So I'm not going to pick one thing out and say, look, we should start taxing exports of energy and should take 25%. Government should stand in and buy 25% and blah, 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 and that's it, not negotiable. Yeah, there are things we can do if I want to be very draconian. But when we do some of these major changes, we've got to take the losers on the journey about it's best for everyone if they give something up, right? Some will be foreigners, some will be locals. But there's got to be a rebalance. I made a comment recently about when I was a teenager or in my 20s, average was good. You could bring up a family on average income. You could buy a house on average income. And that's probably an assessment of when society works, that the average person can get along, and there is a safety net available. What we've created, and I think superannuation is one of the big issues, account-based super, where people look after themselves. That's the basis of look after themselves. It probably shouldn't be ahead of the safety net for everyone. I think we should have a national pension plan which everyone contributes to and gets paid out. That would get rid of tens of thousands of bureaucrats who don't have to do asset tests. And then we have a savings regime on top of that. And if it's reasonable, people get a reasonable support to save more, That would be sensible, right? Are we too far down with $4 trillion? Well, if you think $4 trillion is a lot of money, it's $3 trillion US. The world's $120 trillion economy. No, it's not a lot of money. China's an $18 trillion economy. It's going to be $30 trillion in 20 years' time. So we can change, okay? But acknowledge what's not working, okay? Now, there will be people who say, well, John, you're wrong. Super is working. Well, if it's bloody well working, why is 70% of people retiring still claiming full or part pension? It's not working. But it's certainly working for people who've got $10 million in super or $20 million. It's working for them fantastically. Do they need super? So...
That's an astonishing statement coming from you.
What?
That it's not working in that way.
I've been saying it for years.
Wow.
It's never worked.
Yeah.
It was like... And Keating did a lot of great stuff, but, when you set up something like a national superannuation scheme, you should have probably let it run for 15 or 20 years and said, stop, is it working? How does it need to be? And all we got was these changes about you could put $1.5 million in, all this ramming money into super 20 years ago under Costello when they grandfathered defined benefits, for certain people in Parliament. There was some very dirty deals done. And here we are in 2025. We've got, a black hole in the budget with defined benefits. We've got a number of superannuation funds which are so excessive they're embarrassing, And we've got an inane debate from the bureaucrats saying let's tax unrealised gains over $3 million, as if that's going to solve the problem. We had a round table. Did anyone talk about the unrealised tax? I must have missed that article, So we had, it might have been mentioned in passing, but, and here we are sitting today. Where's this legislation? The legislation which didn't pass the previous parliament was knocked back. So I would have thought, well, it didn't pass. When did they go to the election and say we're going to go again? They were silent on it. Then we had the Liberal Party silent on it. So we've got this great superannuation debate which is not happening.
Can I ask, you mentioned something earlier, and I just want to pick up on this before we wrap this up. You mentioned that the superannuation over $3 million unrealised gains, the tax on that, is there's going to be a situation. They're not passing that because it doesn't affect many people. It's for other reasons. Is that because they're trying to tighten up something for themselves when they're leaving, or?
If you did the valuation of a pension, if you retire from Parliament, say, pick a number, and you're in the cohort, you joined Parliament prior to 2005. So this not only goes for current politicians, but ones who have retired over the last 20 years. If you, say, today retired on a $200,000, I know it's tax, so let's not, people will throw at me in the blog. Yes, I know there's tax, but let's just assume the tax is around robin. So let's say you get 300 and you get 200 in the hand. You're still getting 200 in the hand. And that's indexed for the next 30 years. If you put an net present value on that, you'd have values $7 to $10 million, well above this $3 million limit, right? Now, there's no unrealised tax on the net present value movement of a defined benefit. Now, the Treasurer said there will be. No one can explain how it can be done. I did an interview on Sky when this was announced 3 or 4 years ago, and I said then, I can't work it out, it's going to be worked out, this will die, to the bureaucrats that kept it going, but still no one can work out how a defined benefit pension is going to be taxed on unrealised capital gains. So I think they've brought in a tax which hurts some people and doesn't affect other people, and I think there's a conflict sitting down the middle of that page.
And is anyone going to litigate that, or
No,
do you know?
no. It's a bit of a. I think a lot of journalists know it's rotten,
Right.
but if they go and criticise it, they may get cut off in terms of their information flow out of Parliament. Their little, that's how the world operates.
Well, they give us nothing. We would take them up if we had the funds to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's outrageous, and I think people need to know this stuff.
Well, just simple question: what is the largest defined benefit paid in financial year 2026 to an individual, pre and post tax? Just give me that number. If it's only $100,000, that no one gets more than $100,000, I just say I'm wrong. Don't worry about it. But that doesn't compute with $330 billion of liabilities in the future fund, which, if you talk to some actuaries, will be $500 billion. It's understated. A massive liability.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of genuine people, so I don't want people thinking this is a rat bag argument. There are a lot of legitimate ex-bureaucrats who contributed grossly to their defined benefit and are entitled to it. There are some who didn't. There are some very high on the hog in various departments. The biggest black hole is the defence personnel. There are people who put their lives on the line going overseas. Absolutely should be looked after. There are other people in desk jobs who are retiring.
They're all in the same.
And the retirement ages would shock people. They're not 68. Nowhere near 68 when they retire. So these things have got to be fixed up. That's why he's asked the question. Australia needs to stop wasting money, whether it's immigration or not, that's a different issue. We need to stop the waste, reset, and get going again. The opportunity is so immense. 27 million people sitting below, 3 billion people, many moving into middle class as a trade bloc is so exciting, right? Like, I don't know if we have a free trade agreement with India. We take lots of their students and, whatever. China, I would encourage more capital coming out of China. One of your best defence is to be close in capital. So I'm with Keating on that. Am I scared of China? Well, if I am, why? Why bother? Because if they want to, they can. Do we want to be in that world? I don't think we do. So let's look on the bright side. Well,
I think Molan's equation for that was, look, they need our coal, they need all these resources from us. How about for all the sales that we do that and Australian companies do that, we charge something so that goes straight into defence, basically.
Well, I wouldn't waste it on defence. I mean,
sure.
To me, asking a defence person, there's Warren Buffett's whole thing, never ask a barber if you need a haircut. What's he going to say? Never ask a defence person if he wants more money to defend you.
But it's not.
It was good to see. I just see things. I said to my wife recently when that murderer heads for the hills in Victoria, disgraceful. When do they bring into the army? Now they finally have after 3 or 4 days. But I would have the army in there quick, smart. Look at that guy.
Yeah.
As the police, they're in a bit of turmoil, as you can understand. They've lost 2 of their people. The army should come in there and go, okay, we'll find this guy. And quick, bloody smart. We'll bring in the helicopters and we'll, it'd be good practice for them.
Any
they might
opportunity,
do something.
Any opportunity, they should be utilised. I totally agree. Trained and everything, yeah, absolutely. But you did mention before that our defence is just laughable almost.
Look, it's interesting. On YouTube, I listened to the New Zealand Defence Minister, and he said, look, the best defence they can have is drones and small frigates.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the army stopping drugs coming in this country.
Yeah.
God forbid cigarettes. Obviously, our border control is not working. It's being an economist, you see stuff, which I guess the average, when that drop in excise revenue from tobacco, which was going through the books, and it's like, oh, here's a revelation. Oh, great, people aren't smoking. Yes, they are. They're just not buying cigarettes and paying excise on it. Now, how did all that come into the country? Now, that's a disgrace.
Yeah.
Border control's not working. The Army, Navy, great people. How about they do border control and give them the power to stop this stuff coming in, And that's New Zealand's view. They reckon they'll defend themselves. They said, look, we can't defend ourselves if it gets out of hands. Let's be realistic. But we certainly want to stop narcotics and drugs and illegal immigrants coming in. at this stage, that's our major focus. And I thought that was reasonable, So get you focused on what you can control and what you can't. So, that's the way I think.
John, I know the audience is going to be begging me in the comments once this goes out and
Begging us?
clips get.
Here we go.
No. They're going to say, Joel, you didn't ask him about this. You didn't ask me about that. Please get him in. Is he coming back? So I pray that you do come back. I hope that you found this. It's better than the 5-minute interview on Sky where they interrupt you for most of it, where you get maybe a minute 30 uninterrupted. But look, this is why this podcast exists. There's very clearly the demand there, and the pressure's got to go somewhere. And that's why this march across the Harbour Bridge, which is going ahead not this Saturday, next Saturday, the 13th of September, is getting so much mainstream support from the media. Actually, the media is complaining about it. Actually, the one time we're doing a march for Australia across the bridge, they're like, "Shut it down," But no, there's a lot of mainstream politicians getting behind it because the country there's a feeling that the country's just not working for taxpayers.
Well, some of these politicians better set up a new party.
Yeah,
it's in the middle. It's realistic. It thinks about the next generation. It looks at the problems. Identifies and works out what we can solve, where our waste is. There is time for a new party in Australia, I think, and both sides of Parliament are not doing what they should be doing, and they're play acting with the people of Australia, and they on TV every day, talking their lines, or in Parliament every day, patting each other on the back.
pantomime theatre, right?
That's right. But enough's enough, and Australia should be doing much better than it is, and it can do much better than it is. That's the exciting part of it.
John, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hopefully the next time we make this happen. But guys, I'm going to plug your website, Climb, and so that people can actually see what you guys are about, see your clips, and I think they're going to really value your insights. Whenever I bring people in business into the studio, I've had a few of them in the last week actually. People always tune in, especially the young men. They're really interested in what's going on. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to support this podcast, you can like, share, subscribe, get it out there. Send it to your children. And if you want to shoot us a few bucks, we keep the show free. Thanks to your donations. Click the link in the description, find our PayPal, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.